city leaders asked me to come out and visit with you guys a little bit today. So my name's AJ Thibodeau. I'm a certified arborist. I've been a certified arborist since 1993, and I've been in the tree care industry for 41 years in this past September. So what I will tell you is that you absolutely always want to be working with the certified arborist when you're seeking help with your trees. But I also want to tell you that a certified arborist is not a know-it-all about all things trees. So we work with trees every day out there in the field that have not read the same books that we have read. So our patients don't do us a real good job of telling us what hurts or what doesn't feel right when we're out trying to improve their health. So a lot of what we do really comes from the eyes of the property owner or the tree owner, the person that knows the history of the tree, sees the history of the tree, has witnessed changes in the color of the foliage or the amount of the dead wood or anything like that. So we, by nature of what we do, have to work very closely with the homeowners or with the tree owner to be the best that we can be at what we do. So what I will tell you is that some of the most common problems that we see when we're dealing with sick or declining trees stems from improper planting. What we all think is the easiest part, we dig a hole, we put the tree in the ground, we cover it up, and we start watering it, sets the stage for decades sometimes of struggle, of high maintenance cost, very expensive treatments and applications to keep the tree going and keep it healthy and alive, all from improper planting. So the main thing that I want to share with you guys today is about what to do with your tree when you get home and give it a good start. So trees can come in many different forms. You can get them as bare root. You can get them as what we call B&B or ball and burlapped, basically a root ball that's wrapped with burlap and tied very tightly with some kind of twine or wire basket sometimes, or container grown trees such as this. There are advantages and disadvantages to all three. So from a homeowner's perspective, I am a big fan of a container grown tree if you know what to do when you plant it. So reason being, a lot of trees come what we call ball and burlapped. Again, those are trees that are grown in the ground in a tree farm or in a nursery, and they're dug up. Those root balls are wrapped, and then they're sold off to the consumer. About, I don't know, 50, 60, sometimes 75% of that tree's root system, you know where it remains? In the ground at the tree farm where they dug it up from, right? So you're starting off with a tree that has grown a root system to get the top to grow to the size you see it today, and then over half of that root system is left behind, right? Ball and burlap trees require a lot more care at first. Advantages of a container grown tree. Guess what's in that bucket? That tree's entire root system, right? Guess what it looks like? Circle, 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 circle. Those roots grow out to the limits of that container, and then they start growing around. Again, the advantage, you get the whole root system. The disadvantage is that it's a big ball of mess, right? So when you take that tree out of that container, you want to look at the outside of that root ball. If you see a lot of circling roots, you're going to want to cut those. You're not going to want to plant that in the ground like that because they're going to continue to grow in that circle. And that creates a situation that we call root bound, right? So every part of this tree, every day, week, month, and year that goes by, it's getting bigger and bigger. So think of a bunch of little roots that are like this, and they get bigger, and they get bigger, and they get bigger, and guess what they're eventually going to be? They're going to choke themselves out, right? So it's like tying a piece of rope around a small child's arm. What's going to happen? You can tie it loose today. A year from now, it's not going to be loose, right? 2 years from now, it's going to be a bad thing. So same thing happens with those tree roots. So when you pull that tree out of that container, you're going to want to take your hands, you're going to want to unwrap those circling roots as much as you can. If you can't, I want you to take a good sharp pocket knife, and if it's a larger container tree, a good sharp shovel, and start making vertical cuts around that root ball. If you can't unwrap them, cut them. Cut them and then pull them out. You want to try to get those roots pointing out as much as you can in that hole. Don't do that on top of the ground and then try to pick it up, put it in the hole. Dig a nice wide hole, at least twice the diameter of that root ball. If that root ball is a foot across, that hole needs to be 2 foot across. So on and so forth. A very wide hole where you can take the tree out of the container, set it in that hole, and start unwrapping those roots before you backfill it. That will make a huge difference in the health and the longevity of your tree. The second thing is how deep does that hole need to be? This is a good example. I'm going to talk about this tree. If I'm going to dig a hole to plant this tree, how deep? See that visible root right there? Can y'all see that?
Yes.
When you get through planting that tree, I want to still see that root. This hole's going to be probably at least 2 feet wide, and it's going to be that deep. You don't need a backhoe. You don't need a shovel and start digging like you're trying to put a fence post in the ground. That hole's going to be less than a foot deep. You don't want to put anything on top of that. Sometimes that is not even visible in these containers when you get the tree. And I will tell you why. A grower will grow this to about the size that it is right now in a container this size, and guess what he's got to do to get this tree to get bigger? Put it in a bigger container. So they take it out of this one and they put it in the next size, and they grow it for a year or two, and then they take it out of that one and they put it in the next size, all the way up to 100-gallon containers, big buckets, right? Every time they do that, sometimes that soil level creeps up a little bit, and a little bit, and a little bit. If you can't see that first root on that tree when you plant it, find it. Take off as much of this material right here as you can until you can see those roots. And that's visible when you get done. Very, very important. I will tell you one of the species of trees that is very common. I actually like them. I have one at my house. I think they're beautiful trees. It's called a Chinese pistache. Oh look, there happen to be some right there. So they are notorious for having girdling roots that circle that trunk. And after they're in your yard about 10 or 12 years, guess what happens? They fall over because they choke themselves out, right? They are notorious. Probably 8 out of every 10 Chinese pistache trees we get called out on, that's the problem. They have what we call girdling roots. So some trees are just more susceptible to that than others. Any tree can potentially have that problem if it's planted improperly. So those are the 2 most important things to look for and think about when you get home today and plant your tree. Okay? The next one is location. Location, location, location. Where's the live oaks? What does this tag say? This tree, let's see, I thought I saw it on here.
Maybe on the bag.
It's on this side right here. So this tree has a mature height of 40 to 80 feet tall. It has a mature crown spread of 60 to 100 feet. Think about that. How wide's your front yard? There's not a lot of front yards in your typical neighborhood that's 100 feet wide. These trees can take up a lot of space. I go to front yards that are 50 feet wide, and there's 3 of these puppies planted in the front yard. Problems, right? Not problems today, not problems 10 years from now, 15, 20, and 25 years, problem, right? I go to properties that plant a tree like this that can get 100 feet wide. From the face of the house to the street is about 60 feet, and guess what's lining the street? Power lines. Guess what's going to happen? The one thing that none of us want to happen. Our utility provider, Encore, is going to send a tree trimming crew out, and guess what they're going to do? They are going to prune that tree away from those wires. Is that Encore's fault? No. right? Pay attention to the mature size of that tree before you choose a place to plant it. It can make a big difference in the amount of money you're going to spend in maintaining that tree on your property, okay? So it is absolutely mission critical to keep our lights on in the winds and in the storms and in the winter. Keep those trees out of those power lines. The number one power outage issue that our utility companies experience is these things right here. They cause more power outages than anything else that they deal with. So they're going to, at some point in time, if you have overhead lines on or close to your property, they're going to come through and prune the trees. So it's pretty tough when you spent 10, 15 years growing a beautiful tree in your front yard to watch them come down the street and cut a quarter of that tree off. They do not prune trees for aesthetics. They prune trees for the integrity of the power lines. So help yourself by paying attention to what species you choose based on the size of the property and where you put them. Okay? So, watering trees is completely different than watering your lawn. I will tell you that a lot of you will have irrigation systems on your property to water your lawn. That's exactly what that system was installed and designed to do, water your lawn. They are not going to be sufficient for newly planted trees. They will be fine a few years down the road when that tree gets established, right? But in the beginning, you're going to have to hand water that tree thoroughly, deeply, at least once a week. You gotta do that in January? Everybody say yep. February? Everybody say yep. Yeah. So in the cooler months, in our cooler months, I don't really know what months those are anymore, being that it was still 90-something degrees just a few days ago. In the cooler months is when our trees are growing roots. Even our deciduous trees that go dormant, the dead of winter, when you think that tree is absolutely not doing anything, that tree's growing roots, okay? So that's mission critical for the first few years. I don't care if this tree's in the ground for 2 years or 3 years and it's still this big. I want it growing roots. When the root system gets established and grows enough to support top growth, the top growth will come, right? So a lot of people like to go out and spend a lot of big dollars buying big trees to plant their, I want a tree. I don't want a tree. I want a tree in my front yard. I will tell you that I can take a 65-gallon tree, which is not a huge tree, but it's probably 10, 12 feet tall, day of planting, depending on the species. And I can spend, probably 6 times that much money buying a 200-gallon tree and plant it in the same yard, treat both of them the same, and in about 5 years, you will not be able to tell me which one was the small one. And that's because that smaller tree is going to get its root system established a lot quicker and start putting on top growth a lot sooner, and they're going to catch up. That 65-gallon tree, that 35-gallon tree is going to start growing before that 200-gallon tree will. At least the part that we care about, the part that's above ground, right? So I understand, that need for immediate gratification. I want a nice looking big tree in my front yard. You can have that. You're going to pay for that a lot. It not always gives you the benefit that you think it does. So these are tiny. These are going to need some care. Probably the biggest threat to these small trees right now are called lawnmowers and weed eaters. Right? So another thing, we see a lot of damage on trees, especially small young trees, smooth bark trees like your Vitex and your crepe myrtles, gas powered weed eaters. Those things are brutal. They will peel the bark right off the base of a little tree like that, especially a thin bark tree, right? So after we plant that tree and we get it at the right depth and the hole's the right size and we put the same native soil back in the hole that we took out, we don't amend that with compost or the good stuff, because we make this ideal growing hole. That's exactly where the roots are going to stay, right there in that ideal growing hole. Backfill that hole with the native soil you take out. I don't care how nasty you think it is. And then mulch that, right? We want lawnmowers and weed eaters over here, not right here. So, anybody been to a QT and notice how they mulch their trees? With these, we call them volcanoes, mulch volcanoes that, you know, come up about this far up the trunk. That is exactly how you don't do it. So small little trees like this, 1 to 2 inches of mulch is plenty. Flat and level, not up against the trunk. Doesn't have to be a mound, doesn't have to be a bowl. You don't have to put a berm around the edge of it. Well, that's what holds the water, right? I want the water to be here, but I also want it to be out here. If I plant this tree and I only water this root ball, where are the roots going to stay? Roots don't grow into concrete. There's nothing there for them. There's no oxygen, there's no nutrients, and there's no water. Can they grow through concrete? Oh, they can move that sidewalk all day long if they want to. Oxygen, moisture, nutrients in the surrounding soil around that root ball is just as important as the root ball itself. You want to encourage those roots to grow out. So you're watering this thing once a week, but you're also deep watering the soil around it. You don't have to do it for 12 feet. You know, as the tree gets bigger, you move out and you move out. So those are probably the most important things that I can share with you. Planting depth, planting hole width, mulch. What does mulch do for it other than keep the lawnmowers and the weed eaters away? Maintains moisture. Your watering will last longer, right? It maintains soil temperature. If you can go into a forested area, you guys have a lot of post oak forested areas, that area right there. You go in the dead of August and measure the soil temperature in there versus the soil temperature out here in this open space, it's going to be considerably different, right? Do an entire month without rain. Measure the soil moisture content out here. Measure the soil moisture content. It's going to be completely different, right? Mulch really just emulates that forest floor, right? You can buy all kinds of nifty mulches nowadays made out of rubber, you know, repurposed tires ground up into beautiful colored mulches and stone and different things like that. Yeah, missing one key component. Good composted mulch puts organic matter back in the soil, right? So you're technically fertilizing that tree. You're helping to control soil temperature, and you're helping to control soil moisture, all with mulch. It's pretty simple, pretty easy. So just don't go QT crazy with it. Make a volcano out of it. So 2 to 4 inches. Smaller trees 1 to 2 inches. Larger trees 2 to 4 inches max. Start about right here. Don't start right here. Work your way out. As big of an area as you can tolerate. The bigger the better, right? It's just going to create an environment that's really going to encourage those roots to grow out into that native soil. So, pay attention to location. Many beautiful trees get removed every year for one reason only. They're in the wrong dang place. They're too close to the house. They're too close to the sidewalk. I did read one small thing, and again, I think it was on the live oaks right here. Where was it? Works well as a street tree. Well, yes and no. It works well as a street tree because a live oak tolerates a lot of harsh conditions. Think about the Texas hill country. What's the most dominant species by far in the hill country? Live oaks.